Hello. Welcome, Tamar. Happy almost Passover. Shira. Welcome. Excuse me. Sherry, hi. Oh, I love the purple hearts. Shira, are you in Sedona for Pesach? Oh, Sherry, you're driving. Perfect. I hope I don't put you to sleep while you're driving. Okay, everybody. Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie. So nice to see you twice today. Okay, we're going to wait a few minutes. I'm like exhausted from Pesach leaning, but the learning has energized me. So we'll see if I can keep it up. Thank you. I decided which hair am I going to wear tonight. It was this one. Hi, Phyllis. Happy Passover. God, we have so much to learn tonight. We'll see how much energy we'll all put into it. It's very, very special. It's getting down to the wire. And I'm very lucky. I have a son from New York here with his kids, and Ora's kids are playing with his kids, and maybe they'll give a guest appearance at some point, but I doubt it. Hi, Anna. Happy Passover. Yeah. Lorette, welcome to the class. Welcome, everybody. Those who come in the beginning get a personal welcome. So I'm so happy that you joined. And happy Passover. I hope everybody has a place to be for Passover, or has in mind how they're going to celebrate Passover, what they're going to do in their own homes, and if they have the handmade shmor matzah. Rala, oh wow. Hello. Oh, we must talk. Yes, okay. So everybody has everything they need. Has everybody been cleaning like a mad person like me? Hi, Dahlia. Happy Passover. Are you going to be in New York Passover, Dahlia? 1 second, excuse me. I'm in Kobe's office, and he has something that's perfumed in here that's actually bothering me, but I don't know what it is. No. Okay. Okay, we'll wait a few more minutes, and then we'll begin. So, Jill, you got the matzah. You're in. That's great. That is actually great. Oh, Dahlia, you're in Maryland. Please say hello to your parents for me. That's so nice. And also all your boys. That's so special. Well, while I'm waiting to start, last week, did I tell everybody last week? Yes, I did. That it was my grandson's wedding in South Africa. So you watch Kobe. Oh, I'm going to tell him. That's so nice. He might have a guest appearance because his computer is up here, and when he comes home, he might want it. So we'll see if we can get him to say hello. So last week was my grandson's wedding in South Africa, and man, they know how to party there. It's amazing. We were watching the Sheva Brachas every night. It's like every night there's a party, and they all live in parks, and they're barbecuing. But today was my grandson, the brother of the boy that got married. Today was my grandson Yosef's bar mitzvah. And we were all supposed to go to Israel in February to celebrate his bar mitzvah. And obviously that didn't happen. But yesterday and today is actually his real bar mitzvah. And so the family went from Johannesburg to Cape Town, and they rented a beautiful house overlooking like the water and mountains. And they FaceTimed me while he was having his bar mitzvah, because the Chabad custom, one of the Chabad customs, It's to say a very deep discourse by heart and to have a celebration over that also, besides being called to the Torah. So I was able to be part of that on FaceTime, which is just like amazing that we can feel connected and really be part of things that people are doing on the other side of the world. And it's a gift. It's a gift of our times. Okay, so I want to begin. And first I'm going to begin today. Yud Aleph Nisan was or is the birthday of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And one of the things we learned from the Lubavitcher Rebbe is the significance and importance of, and power of birthdays. And I remember a friend, Judy, who I haven't seen in a very long time, but I remember she told me that after she was learning with me about the power of a person has to bless other people on their birthday, hi Miranda, that Hag Sameach, that she took it and ran with it, and how beautiful a gift it is to be able to celebrate your Hebrew birthday with spirituality and depth and significance, and to give many, many blessings. And I watched a video clip today of the Lubavitcher Rebbe from, I don't know what year it was, probably 25, 26, 27 years ago, on his birthday, when people came by him and they were giving him blessings. And it was very beautiful to watch. So being that today is the birthday of the Rebbe, every year the Rebbe used to send out a message for the holiday, for Passover. So I want to go over the Rebbe's, I want to begin with the Rebbe's message connected to the Rebbe's birthday, that we should all be able to have the strength of knowing how blessed it is to have a Moshe Rabbeinu in our generation, and somebody who could give us guidance and direction, and that speaks the truth. You know, I feel very privileged to have met the Rebbe, and the Rebbe had his Rebbe, and his Rebbe had a Rebbe, and his Rebbe had a Rebbe, and his Rebbe had a Rebbe, all the way back to Avram Avinu, all the way back to the first Jew. And so that's how we know what we're learning is true and significant. So this is a message from the Rebbe for one Pesach many years ago. I'm going to actually take off my glasses to read it. When I'm sitting so close up, I actually don't need my glasses. So the Rebbe starts off, it's a little long, but I think it's very meaningful and deep. It says, the month of Nisan, which is the month we're in, is the festival of Pesach, Hag Hamatzahs, and it's called the first. It's the month of Nisan is the first month of the year. And it says Pesach, Passover, is the first of our festivals of the year. And it says that they encompass more and they have special teachings more than any other day. And one of the basic significances of Pesach, it represents the birthday of the Jewish nation. This is the time when we went out of Egypt and we received the Torah. This is the time the Jews became a nation. And this relates to every single Jew, every single one of us, because we're all part of the Jewish nation. So it said, the Rebbe goes on to say that every person's life is two-faceted. One is on the individual level, and the other is as a member of a society, a member of a nation, a community, a neighborhood, environment. And it says that sometimes you would think your interests and the community interests might be on two different levels. Of one is individual and one is social. However, there is a coexistence, and that is the goal. The goal is that those two aspects coexist to reach a state where they complement each other, and then they become one. So that the individual and the society can be complementary and they can have the same goal together. And for Jews, it says, our life is dedicated to wholeness and completeness in every aspect of our life. Also in what we call the Korban Pesach, which was the Pesach offering. So we know that when the Jews were in Egypt, they were told, when it was clear that God was going to take them out of Egypt, they were told to take a lamb. And at the time, the lamb was the god of the Egyptians. So to take their god, to take a lamb, and to take that lamb through the streets, and they're seeing you take the lamb through the streets, and then to tie that lamb to the bedpost, to your bedpost, and prepare that in 4 days the lamb would be slaughtered, and it would be roasted and eaten, and it would be offered to God. So that we were commanded as the Jewish nation, as a prerequisite for the going out of Egypt, to sacrifice bring the Korban Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice. And all the different offerings we learned, I think it was last week maybe, or the week before, all the different offerings have two general categories. One is the individual offering, and the other is the collective offering. And that's self-explanatory. So in the Korban Pesach, it encompassed both aspects, because at the one hand, it was a personal offering, and the other hand, it was a communal offering. And it was brought, is this Kobe? Would you like to say hello to everybody?
Hello, everybody.
Shira Geller said that she's been listening to your music and is loving it.
Oh, wow, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
So I told everybody you'd be coming up for your computer.
Oh, how'd you know?
Because it's here. Okay. Give me a minute, everybody, and we'll continue. Kobe's going to take...
Continue, pretend I'm not here.
Okay, I'm going to pretend he's not here. Okay, so we have the communal offering, and then we have the personal offering. And each of them have a very important function. So as the personal offering, the offering was individualized. And so it was restricted to those counted in. So it says that when they were commanded to eat this Korban Pesach, that everybody had to form different groups to eat it together, because the whole entire offering had to be eaten. It couldn't be any leftover. So it had to be eaten in a group situation, depending on how many family members or neighbors or friends or whatever were in your group. It had to be eaten by the counted in participants that united together to bring this korban, the sacrifice. And this was not the case with any of the other sacrifices. None of the other sacrifices had this aspect to it. And they all could be brought individually and used individually. So also it was a communal sacrifice, because everyone in the whole community had to bring it at exactly the same time and in the same manner. And the manner was, it had to be roasted on fire, and it said that the head was tucked in between the legs. And so everybody had to eat of it. You couldn't you couldn't claim that you were a vegetarian and didn't want to eat it and ask your neighbor to eat it for you. Everybody had, I am willing. Okay, if the Korban Pesach comes, you've heard me say it here first, I will be willing to eat of it. I will be willing to just partake with the nation, okay? So it says that the eating was at a set time, that the whole entire nation had to eat it at the same time. And this was not the case with any other communal sacrifice. So there's another point of connection between the individual and the community, is that it had to be prepared whole with its head, its legs, and its inwards. And it was specific, the distance between the head and the legs. And it was required that everything at once be prepared together. And it says, and what is the significance? That even though in a community is made up of many different types of individuals, people aren't exactly alike, very different levels from the head to that of the foot. They join together to constitute a community and contribute each their full share. It kind of reminds me, Kobe, are you still here? Larry Geller said he gave you your first haircut. That's wow, so exciting. Really? Yes, at your upshare, Nish. Wow. Oh my God.
He's due for another one.
Yeah, he's due for another one. You better come quick. So, hi, Sarah. It's so exciting to see everybody. It's hard to keep teaching, but Good thing that I can't see I can't see your names if I'm this distant apart. So anyway, so you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of a kibbutz. I remember when I first went to Israel, and I in 1968, and I went to a kibbutz, Kfar Blum, and that no matter who you were in that kibbutz, you could be the doctor, you could be a member of the Knesset, but whoever you were, everybody had to take an equal share in working in the dining room. I always found that fascinating, that from the head to the foot, there was equality on a certain level for everybody. So the question is being asked, the Rebbe is asking, how is unity between one person and another, and between the person and the collective, how is it achieved? And this is indicated by the name Pesach, meaning to pass over, to leap over, indicating that we're leaping over partitions that separate Jew from Jew, that separate one from another, and individual from their community, and we're united in a single organic whole, and we form one nation. So the Rebbe goes on to say, to be able to do this, we have to break through the confines of our own rational and emotional limitations, and we have to rise above all distractions from within and from without in order to have full spiritual liberation. And what is the liberation? The liberation is the essence of the Jew itself, ourselves. So that pintele yid, that tiny spark we always talk about that never dies, that pintele yid that's within us, and that enables us, no matter what, to go back to our root and to go back to our source with our fellow Jews and all the Jewish people. And l'chaim on that one. And I have to say that when I lived in India, I could never have imagined that I would ever live in a Jewish community and love it. Not only live in it, but actually love it. So every Jew has been given the capacity to rise above their own narrow personal interests for the interest of the community and Israel in general. And we take care of each other. We intervene in each other's lives so that no Jew should be lost. We try to help each other. We try to free ourselves from our own personal Mitzrayims, our own personal limitations. So the word Mitzrayim, Egypt, comes from the root word, Metzer, which means limitations or narrowness. So Egypt is, when we say that every Jew is obligated every day to see themselves as if they were leaving Egypt, it means as if they were leaving their own personal limitations, and we help each other in this in whatever form it takes. And the redemption is based on this. It's based on us personally going out of our limitations and out of the communal going out of our limitations. And the Rebbe goes on to say that our sages say that when the coming redemption that we are all waiting for and will experience, it will be in the same manner as the redemption from Egypt, when all Jews, with our young and our old, with our sons and with our daughters, came out of Egypt, and no one was left behind, not a single Jew. Well, that's not actually true, but it says that 4/5 of the Jewish nation died during the plague of darkness. But that's for another time, okay? But of the ones that survived the plague of darkness, everyone left. And it says, and the coming redemption that will come with our righteous Mashiach will be like when we went out of Egypt, when God showed us wonders. And that, again, that the redemption of the community is dependent also on the redemption of the individual. And that's why it's so important for us all in our own personal spiritual work to work on going out of our limitations. What's limiting us spiritually from making that leap, to leap over obstacles, to connect with God and bring that consciousness into our life. And the Rebbe is ending by saying, may God grant this to be the final redemption. And it says the first step is like the first step that took place with the Korban Pesach, draw and take. So what does that mean? Draw back from idolatry, draw back from avodah zarah, and even in its most subtle aspects, anything that is alien to the spirit and to the ways of Torah and Yiddishkeit. It doesn't have to mean that we're actually worshiping an idol, but things that we idolize in a way that's detrimental to our spiritual health and growth, and that we want to help every Jew that we can be reached and prepare for this coming redemption. And it says God established the mitzvahs and he gave Torah, and he made these the channels through which to receive his blessings. And we can be guaranteed of success. And it says, I will remember your wonders of old at the times of the going out of Egypt, and will meditate on all your work and talk of all your doings. So the Rebbe's bracha, the Rebbe's blessing that he gave for the community should hold for all of us. I'm going to say l'chaim. See, this week I've disguised. You'll never know, is this coffee? Is this vodka? Is this wine? Am I eliminating all the chametz? Is it a milkshake? Okay. So I want to say a few practical things before going into some of the teachings for today. There's a lot to learn. I'm just going to teach till I wear out, okay? So I actually cleaned my refrigerator, and I foiled my stove and cleaned my stove, and I'm just waiting for somebody to come and blowtorch my sinks. I know it sounds a little outrageous, but otherwise I have to kind of boil my sink. Okay. So Passover, so this year is a very unusual circumstance. And we have actually 3 days of a Yom Tov. Well, one is Shabbos, and Shabbos starts Friday night to Saturday night. After Shabbos, Saturday night starts the first Seder, and then Sunday night starts the second Seder. So the way we celebrate and the way we light candles is this. Well, let me back up a little. This week we search for chametz. Chametz is any kind of leaven or bread, wheat, grain products. Any kind of those products have to be taken out of your house or locked up. We sell any inadvertent chametz. There are forms at Chabad.org where you can sell your chametz and you lock it up, and there's a whole process. We don't have to know how to do it. Somebody does know how to do it. And so Thursday night, which is tomorrow night, is when we begin the search for the chametz. And the tradition is to take 10 pieces of bread or some kind of leaven, a cookie. My high suggestion is put it in a baggie after you've cleaned your whole house. You don't want crumbs. And when you hide those 10, if you're not by yourself, write down where you put them. Because one year we did not do that. And I actually have to say, after the hundreds of hours I put in cleaning my house, and at that time I had lots of little kids running around, which made it more difficult, there was one piece that no one remembered where they hid it, because I would give it to the kids to hide, and then Shlomo would go look for it, and I never found it until the following year. And you might want to know, where was it? Somehow there was a bunk bed in the boys' room, and I don't know how they lifted up the bed and they put it under one of the legs of that bunk bed. And then when we moved the beds the next year, we found it. So write it down where you put them, okay? Then Friday night is Shabbos. We light the Shabbat candles, candle lighting time, which I think is something like maybe 6:45 in California. Check your own personal city where you are. I know there are people here from New York and from Texas and from Florida and from Israel, and I have a friend coming on from India. So everybody has a different time schedule. So Friday night you light the Shabbat candle and you just say the blessing Lahadlik Ner Shel Shabbos. Saturday night, when it's the first night of Passover and the second night of Passover, you have to light from a pre-existing flame. So the custom is they make, either a 7-day candle, or I have yahrzeit candles that are 2-day candles, 3-day candles, and you keep a flame going. Or if you have a gas burner, there's a gas oven stove that you keep on, there's a flame going, and you light from a pre-existing flame. You do not light a match on Saturday night or Sunday night. And if you go on Chabad.org, you will see what the blessings are. The first blessing is Lahadlik Ner Shel Yom Tov, and the second blessing is the Shekiano, where we're thanking God. And certainly in this year, from last year, we say it with a lot of sincerity for keeping us alive, that we're able to celebrate this holiday in this season. So those are what's done. And I just want to say a beautiful little teaching that I actually heard from Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, and it says that on this night of the Seder, we get back, one of the things we know, that we repair whatever was lost during the year, that the Seder gives it back to us. And he's saying that all the holy moments in our life that we lost, all those inspiring moments, all those things that touch us, all the prayers, all those beautiful insights that we lost, on this night we're given back to, that God is guarding it and he's giving them back to us. So this is a very powerful night, the Seder night, and we're going to learn many different little pieces of Torah that I've learned or I put together. I'll go through a tiny bit. I'm not really going into detail of the Haggadah, but if you go on a website, you go any websites that talk about Passover, but Chabad.org, there's about 25 video classes from all kinds of different teachers going over the different aspects of the Haggadah. So I would suggest opening your Haggadah. If you don't have one, go online. You can download a Haggadah and see what speaks to you. See which part speaks to you, and then listen in detail or to a class, to somebody going into detail by detail the different dynamics. I'm going to do something a little more overall, but and then we'll do a few specifics. Okay, so let me go back to the beginning. I'm so excited. It's learning about Passover is so exciting. You know, when I was little, we always had family gatherings for Passover. And I remember we had the Maxwell house. I'm sure many people from the East had the Maxwell coffee, Haggadah. And I don't know if we ever went through the whole thing, but I remember it was always an exciting moment because all my family would come to my house. We had the biggest house, and my grandmother lived with us. And all the family came, and it was really a time of excitement, even though I really had no idea what Passover was. And we did have matzah. So, Stephanie still uses the Maxwell house, Maxwell coffee Haggadah. That's great. Okay, so we're talking about redemption. Passover is talking about redemption. And that Pesach also means pei is the mouth, sak is speak, that the mouth speaks. That we're celebrating in this month of Nisan the capacity to be renewed, to leave who we were in the past. I mean, this is really a significant part of going through the Seder, is to leave who we were in the past and to become someone new in the future. That I'm not bound by what I was before. That's one of the reasons that Jews don't hold strictly by the horoscope, because we have the ability to do tshuva and we have the ability to change, and that nothing is like set in stone. There's always the opportunity for tshuva and growth. And it says in this month of Nisan, God is not hiding anymore, that he is revealed, and he reveals his name. And he, like, for instance, it's like he pulls the curtains aside, and that we have an aspect of Hashem, we have an aspect of God that we can access in this month. Now, some years there's an extra month of Adar, which is the month Purim is in, to always make sure that Passover happens in the spring. Also, we should know that redemption is not a one-time thing. that one of the highest forms also of speech is song. And Rabbi Nassan, who was a disciple of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, said that we can reveal the song in our heart. I mean, that's so beautiful that there is a song in our heart, and that this is what we can reveal through our work on Passover and through the Passover Seder. So I want to do a teaching that I studied on the significance of matzah, and I learned it with Rebbetzin Friedman. But before, I just want to talk about the Seder, about preparing for the Seder. So, I used to always think that, you have to learn like everything. I want to know what the Seder plate means. There's 6 things on the Seder plate. One is a roasted chicken neck. The other is an egg. One is bitter herbs. There's charosis, which is the apple and walnut and wine mixture that everybody loves. There's karpas, which is the raw onion. And there's chazeres, the lettuce and the Seder plate and the matzahs. And all of this is there. And we can go into the depth of every single part of the Seder. But some of us don't have time, or we don't achieve that. And sometimes you feel bad. Oh, I should have learned more. I should have studied more. I should understand it more. So I want to give this teaching from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev. So we talked about one Passover. He was feeling quite, fulfilled that he had made this Seder, and he had, gone into a lot of depth and a lot of mystical things. And a heavenly voice came and said, "Don't be so proud of your Seder. There's this man, Chaim, whose Seder was just on the highest of the highest of levels, surpassed yours." So, he was just a simple water carrier. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was very curious. What did he do? What did he learn? What did he study? What depths did he get to in his Seder? And he asked this Hasidim to go get him and ask him, please, if he would come and speak with him. And they went through the town, and nobody had heard of him, and they finally were able to find him. And when they came to his house, his wife pointed to him, and he was lying drunk somewhere. And so they figured, what would the Rebbe want with him? And they picked him up, and they carried him. You can't walk on your own feet, and the Rebbe wants you. They're going to schlep him back to the Rebbe, which he did. And Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, who was the holiest of the holy, a great sage, said, "Tell me about your Seder." And Chaim, the water carrier, burst into tears. And the Rebbe calmed him, and he said, "Don't worry, I want to learn from it." And again, he burst into tears. And then he began to tell his story. And he said there was one custom that he always kept every year before Pesach. He kept every year, every day, but particularly before Pesach. And he said every morning after his prayers, he would take vodka, which is chametz, which is made from grain. You cannot have vodka on Passover. And he would say l'chaim to Hashem, to God, after davening. And he said that the morning before Pesach, he realized that he wouldn't be able for 8 days. He wouldn't be able to say l'chaim to God, and that he should say l'chaim for the whole entire holiday. For every single day, he should say l'chaim now. And that's what he did. And he had 8 more l'chaims, and he became very groggy, and he went to sleep. And he slept very soundly, and he hadn't realized how many hours went by. And then his wife tried to wake him because she saw the time was coming. The custom is to finish the first Seder by midnight. And she saw the time was coming, and she couldn't get him up, And she was able to wake him up. And she said, "Everyone is celebrating. What about us?" And he woke up, and he stumbled to the table. And he said the following. He said, "I am a simple person, and my father was a simple person. I can't read Hebrew. I don't know what we're supposed to say now, but I know one thing about Passover. Our ancestors were slaves to the Egyptians, and God took us out of exile. And we're in exile now, and may God redeem us soon." And then he said, "I looked over, and I saw my wife had prepared matzah and wine and eggs and vegetables. So I drank the wine, I ate the food, and I went back to bed, and that was my Seder. And Rabbi Levi Yitzhak said that with those few words, said with his full heart, that he drew God down to his Seder. And I think it's very important to know that no matter, we do our best. You know, the whole thing of the Seder is eating the matzah, eating the things on the Seder plate, telling the story, having the cups of wine. And that is the Seder, and that is beloved by God. And whether we have these mystical intentions, these insights or not, the simplicity of preparing for it and going through it. So everybody should be blessed that their Seder should bring to them an opening of heart and soul. And we're going to learn what matzah will do for us and how it can really be quite life-changing. So it says that why did 4/5 of the Jews die during the plague of darkness? So we know that during the plague of darkness, one of the reasons was for the Jews to go into the homes of the Egyptians and to be able to borrow, to take from their things that belonged to them through their wages, through their working. They saw what was there so that when they would go out of Egypt, they would go out with wealth. But it says another reason for the plague of darkness was that it covered up the fact that 4/5 of the Jewish nation died. So it says that they were so cut off from their essence of who they were that they weren't able to even think of leaving Egypt. And those who were left, those who stayed alive, were the ones who connected with God, and who were connected with God or wanted to connect with God, even if they wouldn't survive. It became very important to them. So they were awakened with a depth of connection that shone a light after the darkness. And there was a huge different distance. They were totally separated from God. And they had a desire to connect to God in the intellectual, emotional, and spiritual levels. And they called this a birth, a new birth. For what happens from this desire is that when you desire something, you give birth to a will. And so the question is, what is the nature of a person's will? Well, if you ever saw a 2-year-old having a tantrum because its will wasn't, they have a will for something, they're going to scream and fight and carry on until that will gets fulfilled. So we were in slavery, there was darkness, there was captivity, and there was no desire. How do we get out of this darkness? There's this saying that it took 1 minute for God to take the Jews out of Egypt, but it took 40 years to take the Egypt out of the Jew. That's how all pervasive it was in a person's nature. So how do we get a person to the level where they will even want a will? They were beaten down. They were slaves. They were in such a state. How do you have the will to want to serve God? How do you have the will to want to survive? Because a person so enslaved has no will. They don't know how to choose. They don't know how to make the correct choice, how to choose God. So to give the will to the people, God had to reveal himself to Bnei Israel, to the children of Israel, and he had to arouse a love and a desire in them. And he did this through wisdom and understanding, through Chachma and Bina. And from that was born the ability to desire and have a choice. So after this, they needed to fix their midos, their emotive qualities, which are 7. And there was a process of going out of Egypt and coming into freedom. So that what part of their spirituality was enslaved in Egypt was the part that were called the midos, the 7 midos: loving kindness, restraint, beauty, endurance, victory, etc. So it says that God had to take infinite light and create a finite world. And he had to cover himself, not give too much light. And because if he gave too much light, this finite world would just explode. So when the Jews were freed, they had to repair their middos, and they had to repair their emotional qualities. And this they did, and we're not going to talk about it tonight. We're going to talk about it next week. Shirley, Fran, welcome. We're going to talk about how we repair our middos, how we repair our loving kindness, how we repair our restraint, how we repair our mercy. All of that we're going to talk about next week. But we begin the repair on the day after the Seder, but we're going to talk about next week. So the process of going out of Egypt was a step-by-step process until a new light came into the world that had never been in the world before. And we're going to experience it again. So we know that every year there is a new light that comes into the world. When we celebrate Passover, we are not saying, oh, we're just keeping this holiday that happened to our ancestors so many years ago, and it has no relevance to us. No, it's new every year. There's a new light that comes into the world that has never been before, and we will experience it. And it will awaken within us a desire for God, and then we will be given the strength to choose where we want to be, where we want to set ourselves. And we'll all sit at a Seder with the crown of God on our head, and we will reveal God in the world. And we are experiencing that even if we are not conscious of it. Just like the story of Chaim, that even if we are not conscious of it, we are going to experience it just by eating the matzah, telling the story, drinking the 4 cups, and having the bitter herbs. So to continue, so it says in the Zohar, what is the essence of matzah? And this teaching, this is from Rebbetzin Malka Freeman, and it's so deep and it's really so beautiful. So the essence of matzah is called the food of emunah, the food of faith. So the first night of the Seder, when you eat the matzah, it is called the bread of faith. And the second night, when you eat the matzah, it's called the bread of healing. So it says that matzah takes the emunah. I'm just going to use the Hebrew from now on. Just remember that emunah means faith. That matzah takes the emunah and it allows it to come into revelation in the mind and the heart. I'm going to say that again. The matzah enables the revelation in the mind and the heart of this quality of emunah, of this quality of faith. And the power of eating the matzah is it internalizes it into the mind and into the heart. What is another reality with emunah? That there's something that is beyond the human mind and doesn't internalize. So, for instance, a person can be God forbid, a person could be a thief. And while they're stealing, they hear a sound. Oh no, it means that somebody's coming. And they pray to God, please God, don't let me get caught. So it says the person has the concept that God is in the world. And what happens, as soon as that person is afraid, he calls out to God, but his emunah is external. His emunah in God, he's calling out to God, so he believes in God. Please, God, help me, make sure I don't get caught. But it's external, because if he was really fulfilling the will of God, he wouldn't be stealing in the first place if he felt that significant. So eating the matzah takes us out of an infantile emunah and allows us to internalize this emunah, and it penetrates the mind and the heart, and it connects the mind and the heart until a person has a different perception of reality. That is the optimal place to go with Emunah, which is to serve God, which is a connection to God. And so when a person contemplates all God's wonders, so our recognition of God and our understanding of God is changed, then we can internalize that aspect of God in a most profound way. So the Haggadah says, matzah zu. Who are we eating this? Who's eating this matzah? Because when we left, we say it's this matzah. Because when we left Egypt with such haste, the dough did not have time to rise. And because Hashem revealed himself to them, that is the only way the Jews left Egypt. It says the Jews had sunk to the 49th level of impurity. They couldn't get out themselves. In a minute, God revealed himself and they ran. So it says that in the Torah, it says there are two mitzvahs that are connected. Don't make for yourself a foreign god, and keep Hag HaMatzah, keep the holiday of matzah. And we see that other nations worship foreign gods, which means they might believe in a supreme God, but they have other sub-gods under that supreme God. And it says that is an emunah that is not internalized in the heart and the brain, but it's beyond. It's referred to in all our texts as a foreign god, something outside, something away from oneself. Like an iron curtain. What is an iron curtain? It separates a person and things from penetration. Nothing can get through an iron curtain. So that something that would penetrate from the brain won't reach the mind and the heart because there's an iron curtain in between. It stops that connection. So just as in the example of the thief that calls out to God, there's a conceptualization of a far away God, meaning God with a minor God, not God Hashem, but like an iron curtain over the brain and the heart that's not allowing the penetration of God into a person's life. There's such a blockage. And one of the things we know is that there is a coarsening when people do things that go against the will of God. In particular with food, in eating non-kosher and eating tray food. It creates a coarseness, and that coarseness is like an iron curtain that prevents godliness from penetrating into the person's life. That's why when people stop eating tray food and they eat kosher, there can be more of a sensitivity to godliness. So this is what matzah does. Matzah prevents the obstruction between our minds and hearts and God and our emunah. So it's making a clear channel. So when we pray and we feel emunah, a connection, we will be able to feel it in our mind and in our heart. And then the next step is this type of experience never disappears. It stays with us. An area that remains with us even after the connection. So when we pray or we have an experience and then we go back to our normal day-to-day life, we take something with us. It doesn't dissolve. We are able now to take from the Seder and take it into our year. That's why in Israel there's a saying, Manishma, how are you? And people say, Kol Beseder, meaning okay. But Kol is everything. Beseder depends on the Seder. Beautiful. We take that into our year, that we are able to take all this experience with us into the year. And emunah stays with us. And this is why matzah is the food of emunah, the food of faith. And the bread of emunah. And what happens with food? Food comes into the body and gives life. And it gives life to the different parts of the body. And when we eat the matzah, we have the experience of the food going into our brain and the food going into our heart and mind. And we can experience emunah on an internal experience. That's what the matzah does for us. It's helping us internalize. I mean, it sounds like very out there, but this is actually what it's doing. It's helping us internalize that level of emunah. And this is what we call Hag HaMatzah, the festival of matzah. And this stays with us. It's saved in us and it stays with us. And after the mitzvah of the first night of eating the matzah, then, and when we bring the korban, then there is, on the next night is the counting of the omer, which has to do with the emotive qualities, the midos, which we will go into depth about next week. So it says we experience emunah in revelation in our minds and in our hearts, and we inspect our deeds. We look inside us when we're going through these days of the counting of the Omer, which will be from Passover to Shavuos. There's times of tremendous introspection, and we look at the mundane things in our life. Where is my integrity? Where are we purifying? How are we purifying ourselves to a higher level? How am I faithful to God? How am I keeping the commandments? Am I on automatic pilot, or do I want to be conscious what I'm doing? Do I want to bring consciousness to what I'm doing? So we can say I'm keeping the mitzvahs, I'm keeping the commandments. How am I keeping it? Am I keeping the commandment on a social level? Am I doing it by rote because I've always done it my whole entire life and I just want to continue to do it? What I'm doing, am I doing it because I'm used to doing it in that way? Am I doing it because this is how it was always done and I don't want to extend myself to make a change? I put myself on automatic pilot. So I've lost sight of how to move forward. Everything is, I'm running through it. I'm saying the words. Okay, knock it off. Okay. So I'm just coasting. A person coasting never gets in touch with their emunah. You're just kind of surviving. This is another way that we want this Passover Seder to be an internal, deeply life-changing experience for us. Otherwise, otherwise we're coasting, and if this year hasn't done for people, or what it has done is to deepen people in many ways, that they're not coasting, to see what's significant, to see what's important. It's so interesting to me because last year for the Seder, it was just Kobe and me. That was it. And Kobe and I cleaned our whole entire house. This time, I didn't have a lot of help, but at least I had some extra help because nobody was going into anybody's homes last year. Nobody was going out at all. And so that from last year to this year, to even be able to have a few extra people and a few extra family deepens the experience, makes it, I want to make it more significant. I want to make it more meaningful. I do appreciate that level that we're going to be able to deepen ourselves this year by sharing our experiences with each other. Oh my God, there's Dean again. Hi, Dean. It's very exciting. Okay. I'm always excited to see all my friends. Even when I see your name, I actually visualize you. And I didn't even have more than coffee and my l'chaim juice. Okay. So we want an energy that renews and revitalizes us and drives us to change and progress with integrity. And I'm making choices, and I'm choosing to have emunah. I'm choosing to be faithful to God. I'm choosing to leave Egypt, to leave my restrictions, to leave my limitations, and to go forward in faithfulness. And the pivotal point in emunah, that is, even if a person falls, if we make a decision for integrity and we internalize the emunah, even if I fall, I will have a measure how to pull myself out again. And what is that? Is the counting of the Omer. So when we finish the first night Seder, and after the second night we start counting the Omer, this offering, we're checking on our integrity. We're now in a 7-week, 7-day process of refining ourselves. And why? In order to be able to receive the Torah. And why do we want to receive the Torah? Because we want to serve God. That's the whole purpose of let my people go to serve me. People often leave out that other half of the sentence. We've always heard, oh, let my people go. But they kind of forget the other half of the sentence. It's the same sentence. Let my people go to serve me. We need to serve Hashem. We're finished with serving Pharaoh. We need to serve Hashem. I just want to say, in the middle of this teaching, I don't know why, I just feel the story belongs here now. So I have a childhood friend. Some of you who know me might have heard this story before. I have a childhood friend. His name is John, and he was the head sound technician for the Grateful Dead for all their years, from the beginning years until the death of Jerry Garcia. He was their sound technician, and that's how Shlomo and I got a lot of backstage passes to Grateful Dead shows. And he told me that in 1972, I believe it was, the Grateful Dead were invited to give a concert in Egypt. And they went to Egypt, and they were giving it at the Great Pyramid. And he went out with some technicians the day before, and they set up all the equipment, and the concert was to be the next day. So after all the equipment was set up, it was late afternoon, the people in charge said, it's time to go, let's go. And he said, no, I'm not going anywhere. He said, I'm staying here with the equipment. And they said, oh, no, you can't stay here. We have a rule that no one can stay by the pyramids overnight. That's our rule in Egypt. So he said, well, then we're going to pack up the equipment and take it with us, because we're not going to do the concert. He said, we're not leaving this equipment here by itself. So they finally agreed to let him stay, and he stayed all by himself. And there was a room, I guess he could enter in the Great Pyramid. There was some entry point where he was going to stay and he was going to sleep. And he told me, he was a person who was raised like I was as a child. Our parents were best friends. We went to Reform Sunday School for a few years, but nothing much more than that. And he said he doesn't know where it came from. He didn't even know he had this memory in him. But all of a sudden, he's sitting in this room in the Great Pyramid, and he yells out at the top of his lungs, Shema Yisroel Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And he said that it just came from his heart and soul. And what do we know about the pyramids? It says, it's even a horrible story to even have to say the words, that the pyramids were built, that Jewish babies were used as mortar and bricks in the building of the pyramid. That's how horrific the time of living in Egypt was. And I just felt when he said that, I said to him, you were somehow connecting with the souls of the Jews that died over the building of the pyramid and that were interned there. And that somehow he had that calling, and who knows what it did in terms of the higher world of releasing those souls. So to continue this text, it says in the Midrash, which is a commentary, don't let this mitzvah be light in your eyes, that it brings peace. So the ups and downs of our lives are before God, and we are always in front of God. And now we're a nation, and as a nation, we're the bride of God. and we are checking ourselves, and we're doing mitzvahs, the commandments, on 2 levels. And when we're doing the commandment of counting the omer, of the refinement, of the searching inside ourselves, and the fixing and the refinement, we're doing it on a daily basis, and we're doing it on a weekly basis. And the counting is to purify all the aspects of our personalities and to bring down a surrounding light, a light not yet internalized in us. This is what we are doing. We're looking at the details, and we're putting it on as a garment, and we're having an overview of ourselves and our relationship with God, and it covers us like a garment does. It protects us from the outside, from dangers, and we experience this level of protection. So to continue, I just want to skip this part on the Omer because we're going to learn that next week. So it says that this was such a powerful experience of faith that even somebody who knew no Torah was afraid to even say a lie on Shabbos. People got it immediately, that they got it right away. And that there was an intense emunah that happened for the people after they ate the matzah. So we take our love, and we take our passions, and we take our infatuation, and we focus it only on Hashem, only on God. Okay, so now we go on to say, after eating the matzah and experiencing this emunah in a new way, we are all able to be closer and have different aspirations. The day after Passover, we go back into our day-to-day life. And all we experienced of emunah during the time of the Seder. And this is what we need to take with us. We need to draw from this for the year. It says everything we have during the year is dependent on the Seder. So we reevaluate what is the purpose of my life, and we take this seriously. I mean, this is a serious consideration, this Seder that we're going into, that all the preparation, everything that goes into it. So we come to another part, moving aside for a moment, on the 10 Commandments. What is the first commandment? I am God your God who took you out of Egypt. Why isn't the first commandment, I am God your God who created the earth? Why is it, I am Hashem who took you out of Egypt? Because when the world was created, we learn that it was created something from nothing. It's called yesh me'ayin, somethingness from nothingness. That's how God created the world. But it says that it doesn't compare to taking the Jews out of Egypt, because the Jews were on minus 49 level of impurity. And it says that if they had reached one more level, it would have been impossible ever to take them out of Egypt. So creating a nation from minus 49 is much bigger revelation than creating something from nothing. We are starting from negative 49. We have to take this out of the forces of unholiness and take it and put it in the force of holiness. And it happens when we make an effort and when we fix ourselves and we change on a deep level. So, for example, one of the first qualities is the quality of love. So there are a lot of things that I love in the world, and we have a very non-Jewish view of culture and the world. So we have an opportunity to evaluate what is love, what is kindness, what is the way that I want to go according to the Jewish teachings. What do we take for granted and what's really a necessity? Is it for God? We need to put in that energy. We need to start that process. We can have beautiful things and beautiful homes and beautiful work and whatever if we know the focus is that we're serving God. We're not serving what's the latest. We're not serving what will our neighbors think, but we're serving God. And this is hugely important. And we start with matzah. It's just amazing that we just start with matzah. So it's not something outside me. It's not like we're beaming in godliness. We're internalizing it. We're taking it very seriously. How does faith affect your day-to-day life? It says it's not enough that we have faith and belief in it. It has to produce an internal change within us. So there's a story about a farmer who had a cow. And he milked the cow and he sold the milk, and that's the only way he lived. And one day he woke up and the cow was lying down, and the cows don't lie down except when they're sick, and he didn't know what to do. And nobody could help him, and he needed this money from this cow to live. So he took a trip to see Rebbe Elimelech of Lezhensk, who we talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago. It was his yahrzeit. He's buried in Poland, and we spoke about him. And he said he arrived there right before Shabbos, and he went to the shul, and so we didn't have a chance to talk to him yet. And then there was the Kabbalah Shabbos service, and the meal, and the singing, and the teaching, and all the stories. And it was on Friday night, and it was on Saturday day. And by the time Shabbos was over, he didn't even remember he had a cow. He stayed for months. He was so taken by what he received there. So we in our lives, we have our cows, we have our lives, we have our priorities, and then comes Pesach, then comes Passover. And it is an opportunity to leap over all that and to reach another level, to have a change in our emunah, for something to be different in our lives. And it can be a mind-blowing experience to access this. And we don't do it alone. Hashem is our partner. This is how we do it. And the more we are aware, the more we can change on a realistic level. And we can go beyond. So that there is a flow of abundance that comes into the world. And the process starts the first of the month of Nisan, the Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And that's when the Mishkan, the sanctuary, was built. And what was the purpose? To build a sanctuary in our hearts, inside of us, in our own hearts. And it says, build me a sanctuary and I will dwell within them. I will dwell within you in both your hearts, in your good inclination and your bad inclination. And that we are busy for a purpose for Hashem. Now, for Passover, we're running around like lunatics. I sent a little meme to my kids today. It was on one of my apps, and it said, somehow it was making fun of Dr. Fauci asking everybody to wear 2 masks, and it says, and what are we laughing at? We're foiling our kitchens, and we're covering everything that, God forbid, a tiny piece, a drop, a size of grain, of a rice grain should not be found on any surface, in any pot, in our sink, anywhere in our house at all. Nothing. That's how we don't want it to penetrate. We cover and we cover and we cover to make sure that doesn't happen. So, and the nation is making itself totally crazy. I mean, there are Pesach programs, and there are people who go away, and they're making sure they don't want to really clean their houses, and on and on and on and on. So, all because God asked us to do this. It's an opportunity. This was not given to any other nation. It was only given to the Jewish nation to do. So this comes from the love from God. And from the fact that the Jews had Mesiras Nefesh, like we said before, they dragged the lamb through the streets. Now, it's interesting because the month of Nisan has a few things associated with it. It says the body part that's associated with the month is the right leg, which is the leg of chesed, which is the leg of loving kindness. Hi, Sina. Okay, and that means if it's only the right leg, it's not yet balanced. And yet we came out of Egypt hopping on one leg. And Hashem revealed himself and his love for us like a lover hoping for the beloved to show up, jumping, looking from hilltop to hilltop, mountain to mountain, which comes from Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. With a passion, we experience God's love. And the inner Jew that came from the tribe of Yehuda burst into love in response to the revelation. And what was the sign of the month? Was the baby lamb. And all the Mesiras Nefesh, all the self-sacrifice each day, they dragged the lamb, that which is their God, through the streets of Egypt, the Korban Pesach, and they tied it on the bedposts. And they had an exuberance to do the mitzvah. And the baby lamb was roasted in the fetal position, the head down, between the legs. And the nation was born, and it was called Am Yisrael. The army of Hashem left Mitzrayim, left the limitations, left the restrictions behind. And they went hopping out. That was how brutally persecuted they came out. The Jews came out wounded and maimed and handicapped. And the whole thing was so overwhelming, so cosmic on so many levels. But they ran after God. They followed God. And this is the panemius. This is the inwardness, the inner depth of every Jew. This is who we are. The panemius, the inner depth, is an experience of the going out of Egypt, to leave the decadence, the power, the sorcery of the world, to jump out and to follow God. The person who wrote the Haggadah wrote it to take us step by step until we sing praises. We sing the Hallel at the end with complete recognition and devotion. We have to sing Hallel. This is the day of the rejoicing of the heart. The way you come to see Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet, he doesn't come through the door. He comes in through the heart. And I want to tell a story of a woman I met in it must have been like in maybe early 1970s. I met her at Shlomo Carlebach's house. And she now lives in Yerushalayim and runs a huge school and is inspiring hundreds of women. But at the time, she was married to a man that was a psychiatrist and didn't believe in God at all. And they had one daughter, and she was 6 years old. And it meant a lot to both the mother and the daughter. They really wanted to have a Seder. They had that Maxwell House coffee Haggadah open on the table. You know, her parents had a Seder. And they sat down to have the Seder. And then at some point, the husband said, "This is ridiculous. Come on, let's just eat. I'm finished. I don't want to do this." And the little girl, who is 6 years old, she happens to live in the holy city of Hebron for the last 25 years. She went to the window and she stood there sobbing and sobbing. And her mother came over to her and said, What's the matter? And she said, as she pointed outside, "I see Elijah, the prophet, but nobody is letting him in. No one is opening the door." So we get to open the door of our hearts. That's what we're opening. We're opening the door of our hearts through the Passover Seder. And these times have never been before. This way as never been before. And I want to go now into what's called the 15 steps of the Seder. I'm going to take you on like a little journey of all the different steps of the Seder. But before, I want to say L'chaim and tell you, I remember, I don't know what year it was, but I know it was more than 25 years ago, because I believed we lived in our old house on Navy Street. And it was a 3-day holiday like it is this year. It was Shabbos, and then Saturday night was Passover. And then Saturday night was Passover, and Sunday night was Passover. And for some reason, every year we always, until the last maybe 10 years, that we started to do our big public Seder for hundreds of people at the Olympic Collection. For many years, we did it in different places of the city. And one year, my husband became friends with the person who owned the Lowe's Hotel in Santa Monica. And when he advertised it, he called it the Schmaltzy Lowe's Hotel. He liked to, pump that up. And he decided that we're going to have the Seder that year at the Schmaltzy Lowe's Hotel. It's going to be a great location, a lot of, prestige to the location. The only problem is that normally, like when we do it at the Olympic Collection, we drive over before Passover starts and we walk home. Now, from the Olympic Collection to our house is only 1 mile. But from the Schmaltzy Lowe's Hotel to where we lived on Navy Street was four and maybe 4.5 miles. Maybe it was 4 miles. I don't want to exaggerate, to our house. But because it was Shabbos and then Passover, we couldn't drive there. We had to walk there. So on Shabbos afternoon, we walked 4 miles to the Schmaltzy Lowe's Hotel. And then after the first Seder, it was too expensive always to do 2 nights of Seder in a hotel, because even though it was the only event we ever charged for during the year, we never charged how much it cost us. That Passover is a very expensive holiday for everybody, even in their homes with the matzah and the food. So there was no way we could do 2 nights there. We could only do 1 night there, and then we would have like maybe 50 or 60 people the second night at our home. So we had to walk back. So we walked 4 miles to the Seder, we ran the Seder, and then we had to walk 4 miles home. That was the only time we used the Schmaltzy Lowe's Hotel. And it was like this year that we have the Saturday night, the Seder. So I learned this teaching with a wonderful teacher from South Africa, Tamar Tabach. If I couldn't be in South Africa at my grandson's wedding, at least I learned a piece of Torah from somebody teaching from South Africa. So this is about the journey of transformation, because when we start the Haggadah, and I have in my house at least maybe 25 different Haggadahs with different commentaries from different sources and different people, and each one is so full of information and so full of depth. So, but each one begins the same, and it begins by talking about the 15 steps. And if you were ever at any of our public Seders, whoever was our youngest, cutest child, we would get to sing the 15 steps of the Seder. So this is a journey of transformation through the 15 steps of the Seder. So the first step is that we start with Kadesh, which is the sanctification of holiness. When we sanctify, we're separating holy from the mundane. So we first make Kiddush, and Kiddush sets the stage. The second step in the Seder is the Orchatz, where we wash the hands. Now, the only 2 steps that are linked together are Kadesh and Orchatz, the first 2 steps of the Seder. and they're linked with a vav. They're one movement. And some of this teaching is also from Sarah Yehuda Schneider, who lives in the holy city of Jerusalem. And many years ago, if any of you are from LA, we used to have her come and teach here every year, which was always very exciting. So she teaches that this is a template for growth together that refers to both the masculine and the feminine aspects of God, which we call Chachma, which is wisdom, and Bina, which is understanding. So Chachma is the seed of potential, and Bina is beginning when you use that potential and you create something. They come together, so it's like a giant conception. So Pesach is a rebirth. We are embryos in creation in God's hands, and we are being conceived anew. So it's very interesting about the Seder plate. So, when I was growing up, my mother had I'm so sorry, I wanted to bring it upstairs to show the class, but it's downstairs, and I'm not going downstairs because maybe some of you will disappear and then I'll miss you. But I'll show it next week. I have a matzah cover that was made by my grandmother, had a handicapped sister named Frida, who never got out of Europe. And she embroidered this matzah cover, which I have never had cleaned because I'm afraid it's going to fall apart. It's hand embroidered. And I always thought my whole life growing up, like, this is such a weird matzah cover because it was round and it had 3 compartments. And in Hebrew, it was stitched Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. And I thought, and the square matzah didn't really go well in the round matzah cover. And it was always quite bizarre to me until I moved to Jerusalem in 1974 and had my first Passover on Mount Zion. And I learned about shmora matzah, which is handmade matzah, which is round. So, it's so interesting that this was part of my family tradition, and none of us, no one ever asked my grandmother. I'm sure maybe she would have known, or she left Europe as a young child. I didn't even know if she would know about shmora matzah. But, these things that are so important. One of the things that the Rebbe, happy birthday Rebbe, asked is that everybody have shmor matzah at their Seder. And we've been giving it out all week to people. And you can get it at Costco. It's called Holy Land Matzah, and it's less expensive at Costco than it is at Ralph's, and that's less expensive than in the kosher stores. So that's just a tip. So you have the Seder plate, and you have the 3 matzahs, and the matzahs do represent Kohen, Yisrael, and Levi. So according to Kabbalah, we see that the items that are on the Seder plate, so we have a round Seder plate, and on the Seder plate, we have the roasted chicken neck, we have the egg that represents the sacrifice, we have the bitter herbs, which are an essential part of the Seder, we have the charosis, the paste of ground apples and nuts and wine. We have the karpas, we have the vegetable, and we have the chazeres, which is the romaine lettuce and the grated horseradish together. So what is Kabbalah? We're going to go into what Kabbalah teaches about us, that these items have to be placed, the items of the Seder plate are placed on top of the matzahs. So according to Kabbalah, it says that spiritual illumination reaches this world by intense lights, and the lights go into vessels, and the vessels restrain the lights, because if you have nothing to hold the light, you can't use it in the same way. Like if you were pouring oil, you need a vessel to hold it. and that the vessels are so that the creation won't be overwhelmed by the lights. And matzahs are alluded to as the vessels. So we put the Seder plate, which is the lights, and we put it on top of the matzahs so that the light goes into the vessels. So, and that is why we have round matzah, like my grandmother's matzah cover. Then and we know that the Seder plate depicts what we call the sphirot, the energy emanations with which the world was created. And the three matzahs represent, besides Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael, they represent Chachma, Bina, and Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And the 6 items correspond to what we call the 6 emotions, the midos that we spoke about a tiny bit, including the Seder plate. So it says that the matzahs represent the vessels of intellectual faculties, and the lights are the emotions, and lights always go into vessels. Now, how does this represent the 10 sphirot? Because we have the 6 items on the Seder plate, then we have the Seder plate itself, which is 7, and then we have the 3 matzahs, which are Chachma, Bina, and Das, and that equals 10, and that represents the 10 sphirot. Good morning, Nomi from Yerushalayim. In Israel, for anyone who is lucky enough to live in Israel, and we're all soon going to be there, the Seder is only kept for one night. It's only outside Israel that we have 2 nights. So that's a plug. Okay, so let's go on. So we have the Seder plate and we have the matzahs. And this is a blueprint. We have our blueprint in front of us. So how rich every ritual is. Like, if that is only the beginning, see this very thick book? It's all commentary, basically. And I really could sit here going through commentary all night. And if I hadn't cleaned the whole entire day, which is not in my lifestyle bag of skills, I might have been able to stay up all night. But I still have cleaning to do, unfortunately. I have to kosher my sinks, but we'll see what happens. We'll see how long I can go. Okay, so there's so many details. It's so rich. So this is just like a 15-step overview in terms of transformation. So now we have the 4 cups of wine. And the 4 cups of wine are reminiscent of Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, our 4 mothers. And the 3 matzahs are reminiscent of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, our 3 fathers. And it says that, and what is matzah? Matzah is a simple combination of flour and water. It's uncomplicated. But it's the essence of everything. Matzah is the essence of everything. So we know that the emotion of joy is striving upwards. And the feminine and the masculine come together in the Chachma and the Bina. And this is conceived in the heavenly realms. And this is how conception begins. And this is the different aspects of God that are coming in to save the Jews in the world. Next in the order of the Seder, we have the karpas. Now, the karpas is a vegetable. It comes from the vegetable kingdom. And the vegetable kingdom needs a lot of high maintenance. That you have a little sapling, a little seed, and the seed disintegrates, and you actually think nothing is going to happen with this seed. That you put it in the ground and nothing happens, and you because we can't see it disintegrating. And then we say, oh, just forget it. I wasted my time. But wait, all of a sudden there's a vegetable growing, or there's a tree that's growing. And we know that God was guarding this little seed. And even when it was disintegrating, even when we couldn't see. So one of the teachings is that when you see a person that's disintegrating, and God forbid it's happening to people. So when you see this in the world, when you meet people, you tell them, don't give up. You're just growing. And we know that from the karpas. We know it from the vegetable. So it and the karpas is on a low level in the hierarchy of foods, and it's called a limited consciousness. In Kabbalah, it's called mochin del katnus. It's the limited level of consciousness. And now we're growing. We're going through the steps of the Seder. So we have to see when we start the Seder, the 15 steps are very important because it's a roadmap to growth, how we move forward. So now we come to Yachatz, which is the breaking of the middle matzah. So in our youth, we think we know it all. True. There's no one here who didn't think they know it all. And we don't, but it's a mistake. We don't even know who we really are. And the middle matzah is broken, and the bigger, better piece is put away for later. It's the afikomen that comes at the end of the meal. And the breakage, what is the breakage about? The breakage is a catalyst for finding true peace, true wholeness, which is the whole journey of the Seder. So next we come to Magid, which is telling the story. It's the beauty of the story, the power of the transformation of the Seder. So what happens when something breaks? We groan. It's like from the depth of our heart, there's a groan. And we say, God, we want to come close. We want true freedom. We want you. The Jews wanted out of their constraints. We developed the groan. Now we're Magid. We're into telling the story. We developed the groan into speech with words. What happened next? What happened next? And we tell the story. And it comes together in a rich and deep story. And our identity evolves into who we became. All that we knew. We have been born. We were initiated as a Jewish people, as a Jewish nation with divine love, with giftedness on the spiritual level. And now the stage is set for a 3-step process. The first step is hachna'ah, which is the dissolution of our ego and our old identity. We're rebirthing. We're rebirthing individually, and we're rebirthing as a nation. We know our essence. We can wash away levels of ego, past sins. We can put ourselves in front of God. Now here's a beautiful teaching. It says, we are Jewish. We're not Jewish and something else. I think this is so deep. We are Jewish. It is the essence of who we are. We wash away everything else that is not part of our essence. We're raksa, the washing, the cleaning up our act, the letting go of what is not freedom. We're confused at this point. And Hashem is guiding us. This is good. This is good. This is evil. This is good. This is evil. Get rid of this. Keep that. That's raksa. That's the washing away. And it sensitizes us to what is true freedom and pleasure. Now we come to motzi, which is we're getting to the eating of the matzah. And God brings forth motzi matzah. Even when we were little saplings, even when we were beginning to grow, everything is from God. And the matzah is the most incredible mitzvah. It's the essence of the whole Passover Seder. And I just have to say that one year, when we were in that schmaltzy, I love to say that word, schmaltzy Lowe's Hotel that I just mentioned, there was a friend of mine who had been learning with me years and years. And she came, she lived in Santa Monica. She was so excited. It was near her. She came to the Seder. She was helping everybody. And one of the things, there are people who are on very strict diets and who really almost never deviate. And she was a member of Overeaters Anonymous, and she was very, very strict. I had actually, in all the years she came to my house for Friday night dinner, I don't even think ever she might have even eaten dinner, but she used to come all the time. And she helped in the beginning. She greeted people, she seated people, she was sitting with me, then she got up and she helped everybody wash. And when we came to eat the and she knew the answers to all the questions. And when my husband would ask who understands this, she'd give a speech and she'd tell what it meant. And when we came to eating the matzah, I looked around because she was no longer next to me, and I realized she had left because she didn't want to eat the matzah, because she doesn't eat grain or bread. And I just, to this day, this is like 30 years later, it bothers me. It's like a knife wound that she came to the Seder, and the matzah is the essence of the Seder, and she did not have the matzah. The matzah is incredible. It's the most incredible mitzvah. God calls it, like we've been talking about, the bread of emunah, the bread of faith. The first night and the second night, the bread of healing. And we understand this, and we have to eat it in that vein. It's very important how we eat the matzah. It's a time, from the time we say the blessing on the eating of the matzah, we should not be speaking. We should be focusing on the eating of the matzah. And it's not just to have a little bite. It's to eat at least half of a shmor matzah, a handmade matzah. To focus on internalizing it, to take it inside us with awareness, with consciousness, not to just knock it off and have it, but truly to go through it with depth, with really depth of our soul. And the Zohar is saying it affects our soul on a very deep level. And our souls, there is not a person whose soul does not need healing. And this is what this matzah, it sounds out of the box, but this is what it does for us. It brings us to this level of healing in our faith, and healing in what we need healing with on the physical and spiritual level. And what was the original sin? It was eating from the tree of knowledge. It had to do with eating. And what is a commentary of what that tree was? It was a wheat tree, the basic of life. And when Adam and Eve, Chava, sinned with eating, the deepest sin was what? In Jewish history, the deepest sin had to do with eating. So at the Seder, there's a positive commandment to eat. And we are bringing this awareness of God into our bodies. It is the bridging of the physical and the spirit with the spiritual. It's the bridging of the bread of faith, which is the ultimate healing. Now we have the morah. Now we eat the morah after we eat the matzah. And this is the bitterest part of the Seder. And it says, and what are we asking at the bitterest part of the Seder? Why do we need our suffering? Why is this such an important part of the Seder, that we're acknowledging this level of suffering? So from the Zohar, it says, from the Korban Pesach, we know about chesed, loving kindness. From the egg, which represents the sacrifice, there's a quality of gevurah, or restraints. And what is morah? Morah represents tiferet, which is harmony, which is beauty, which is rachamim, which is mercy. And why does morah align with beauty? Because Tiferes, which is the sphere that it aligns with, its essence is the perfect blend of loving kindness and Gevurah. So we have Chesed and Gevurah and Tiferes, and it's a blend, this harmony. And if we just had Chesed, pure flowing Chesed, we would be flooded with light, but there would be no color to it, no little nuances to it. And the Morah, that level of bitterness over the suffering, connects that beauty, makes it viable, makes it powerful. And it says that this pain is entwined with the joy, and this is the deepest part of the experience of the Morah. You are not all bitter, we are observing it. So let's say a person complains about their marriage. Well, they have a marriage. Or they complain about their children. They have children. Or they complain about aches in their body. They have a body. So that there might be suffering, but there is something deeper to that. And that is what the Morah represents. And with Morah, we have the birth of empathy, compassion. And what happens when you have Morah? What happens when you have this level of bitterness and suffering? Your heart is stretched through challenges, and your heart will not go back to its old ways. We embrace this Morah for our growth. That is the purpose of the Morah in the Seder, is for our growth. Next, we come to Korach, where we're making the sandwich, we're making the Hillel sandwich, and we are growing and expanding with consciousness. So the Hillel sandwich is, we have the matzah, we have the morah, we dip it in the charosis, we have the romaine lettuce with it. We're going beyond our mind. The mind can't hold a paradox simultaneously, two different things at the same time. But we take the matzah and we put the matzah, which is emunah, and the morah, which is bitterness, and we then dip it in the charosis, which is sweetness, and we combine faith with suffering, and we go above the mind. We bring an awareness of true freedom. We attach ourselves to God. We stretch. You know, I just got an offer from a stretch lab. You could actually go somewhere and they stretch you. Doesn't that sound fun? So we stretch for huge we stretch because we want to stretch our soul. We want it to be bigger. We want it to encompass more. We want it to hold better. Next of the 15 steps of the Seder is the Shulchan Aruch. This is called the set table. This is the feasting in the highest form of service. We're now in the middle. We had started the Hallel, which are the prayers of praise. We're in the middle. Now we eat. And then we continue saying these praises of Hallel. And my suggestion for anybody that's going to a Seder or making their own Seder and wants to really enjoy it is eat first. Eat earlier. Like, you can't start your Seder till after 8 o'clock at night. Eat at 5. Don't come to your Seder starving. Because if you come to your Seder hungry, you're going to rush through your Seder, and you're going to lose that opportunity because you want the Shulchan Aruch part. So eat first, and then you'll be able to go through it with a lot of depth and consciousness. So it says, before we didn't understand what good was, but now we've progressed. Remember, we've gone through the groaning stage, and now we've progressed, and we're expanding, and what is good was good is good. What tastes sweet is sweet. We are not confused anymore. Isn't that wonderful? To have a moment that we're not confused anymore. We're serving God with our physicality. The matzah has healed. There's no contradiction between our body and our soul. We elevate the physical in ultimate pleasure. Next, we come to Tzafon, where we're eating the afikomen, the piece we put away. We were too small in the beginning. When we broke that middle matzah, We were too small at that point to live up to our true potential. We bring that out now through the steps of the Seder. We've progressed till we can live up to our true potential with healing love and with goodness. And we're embracing our best selves. And we're reaching this height of love and emunah. Next we come to Barak, blessing God. Now we have the third cup of wine. I just want to say, after the Afikomen, the custom is not to eat any more food. All we have after the Afikomen is the wine, the third and fourth cups of wine. And we're saying the Hallel. We're thanking God for the concealed good. The revealed good we see, but the concealed good. My friend Miriam Rhodes and I used to always say when we would hear bad news, God forbid, oh, this is another piece of concealed good. Because everything that comes from God's hand is good. But sometimes it's very hard to see. But now we're thanking God because we have a different headspace. We have an expanded headspace. And God is healing us in every crevice of our heart and mind. And now we've gone from the groan, we've gone to the story, we've gone to the words, and now we come to the song. And as we said before, in the name of Rev Natan from Breslov, that song is the highest level of the heart. And we sing songs of praise to God. And now we come to Nertza, when everything is done. The dishes are dirty, the table is messy, the Seder's at the end. And we praise Hashem. And this is the place of union between the masculine aspect of godliness and the feminine aspect, and all our hopes and desires for the Seder. And we bring it into practice, and we bring this as a fruition for our journey. And we have united God with his people, which is us. We actually are those people. And our will becomes God's will, and our love is aroused, and we recite the Song of Songs, and we fully become this vessel to receive and to radiate godliness in the world. And God wants to give this to us, and we need strong vessels to contain the light. And this is a night of chesed, a night of love, when we're bringing sanctification of the name of God. So, there's just so much more, and there's just so much more. But I want to end with this story, and I don't even know. I mean, there's so much to say here. Like when we dip, it's interesting. All the different. I have my whole book underlined, but. I just want to see something about the dipping, if I can find it easily. Otherwise, I'm going to tell it to you outside without looking at it inside. So it says when you dip something, I'm sure I'm not going to, let me see if I can find it quickly. Okay, here it is. So it says that the reason for karpas, the eating the vegetable that's dipped in salt waters, says, a lot of people say some of these customs are to keep the children awake or get their attention, but it's the children as us. We get bored probably easier than the children do. So this is one of the 4 questions. On all nights, we need not dip even once, but on this night, we dip twice. But there is dipping in other times. On Rosh Hashanah, for example, we dip in apple and honey. And when we eat bread during the year, we dip it in salt. After you make hamotzi, you dip it in salt. And according to the Arizal, actually, you dip it 3 times in salt. So how can we say on all other nights we need not dip even once? It says the difference is that the ritual tonight revolves around the dipping itself. So on Rosh Hashanah, the main intention is that when we dip, we're reciting a prayer for a sweet new year. That's what the apple dipped in honey is. And when we dip the bread in salt, we're emphasizing it's not the dipping, but the salt on the table, because salt was present in all the sacrifices, the korbanos, that occurred in the temple. And so these were not dipping ceremonies. So that this is a dipping ceremony. So according to Kabbalah, dipping is symbolic of bitul, which is surrender. And the purpose of dipping a food into a flavoring agent is that the food should surrender some of its own taste and give way to a more desirable quality in the flavoring agent, like dipping an egg roll into sweet and sour duck sauce, yum yum. So what drives a person to dip is that you know that the food, let's say in the terms of the food, it's lacking something. It's lacking a certain taste, and it will be enhanced by dipping it into a different sauce. But Pesach is a holiday of bitul, of self-nullification. We eat unleavened bread, which doesn't have a chance to rise. That's symbolic of humility. We celebrate the birth of a nation. So the dipping is different. So tonight, when our souls are awakened, we realize there's something more important, more rewarding than the pursuit of happiness for its own sake. That we can make a transition through this nullification from an egoistic, distorted human look at reality to a more godly look. God took us out of Egypt that only so that we will be free to serve him. And that free from the Egyptians and from the desire for self-enrichment, which draws us away from godliness. Let me do another little part, and then we'll end with this story. When it says, another part that I always spoke to me is it says that whoever is hungry, come and eat. Meaning that we want to make place at our Seder table. I mean, this year it's very different. But because people are being very cautious, not everybody can be together with other people. Last year was the first year. This is the second year in all the years that I have lived in Los Angeles and been a Chabad shlucha, that I have not been involved in a public Seder with hundreds of people. So it is very different. But when we say who is hungry, means not, your best friend that you really want to invite to your Seder, but somebody who wouldn't have a Seder, somebody who you would find difficult to include and invite to the Seder. That's what is giving us that directive. That's where we're supposed to be going with all these things. So it says that we break the middle matzah, and just like when, I don't know if when you were little, but when I was little, you had a best friend, and then you had a heart, but you each had a broken half of the heart necklace, and you wore the broken half around your neck. So it's almost like that. So the smaller piece, we say is connected to the exile and the slavery, and the larger piece that we put away for the afikomen is connected to the redemption. So we break the afikomen into 5 pieces, and it's, according to Kabbalah, it's called the sweetening of the severities. And the middle matzah represents this. Remember, the top one is chesed, the chachma, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. The middle matzah represents severity. That's connected to Yitzhak. And that the afikomen represents kindness. So we create kindness. We create kindness from the middle matzah that represents severity, that represents Yitzhak, which is the softening of severity into kindness. And according to Kabbalah, there are 5 forces of severity, so we break the afikomen into 5 pieces to ensure that each harsh force is softened. So the piece that's bigger, we break that into 5 pieces, and then we put it aside. So I just want to, there's so much, I could go on, but I think my sinks need to be kosher, and I have to make my vegetable orders. And we do say next year in Yerushalayim, and the people in Yerushalayim say next year in a rebuilt Yerushalayim. So I want to end with another story. It's kind of a Passover story. I heard this story actually personally from Shlomo Carlebach. So Shlomo Carlebach's father, his name was Naphtali Carlebach, and he was a rabbi in Berlin, Germany, during World War I. And one day he receives a letter from a man named Moshe, who says his name is Moshe, he's a matzah baker. And he was a matzah baker for a certain area in Germany, and now he's in the army. And he's writing to Rabbi Naphtali Carlebach to ask him if he would please go to the main office of the army in Berlin, where a person could come and make a request to have a family member or someone excused from the army for some particular reason. Let's say somebody was an only son, or somebody was, whatever reason. They needed, the father got sick, the mother got sick. So this matzah baker asked Rabbi Naphtali Carlebach if he could go and ask the head general to release him from the army so that he could bake matzah, so the Jews in his area would have matzah. And he would need, when you're baking matzah is baked, in case you don't know it, all year round. So there are matzah bakeries. There's one in Kfar Chaban in Israel. There are some in Brooklyn that actually bake to have enough matzah for everybody in the world that wants their matzah. That's the handmade matzah. They bake almost all year round. So, and then I have one more great story. Okay, I just thought of it. So, Rabbi Naphtali Carlebach thinks, is he crazy? They're going to let a Jew out of the army for baking matzah, but he felt an obligation. He felt that he really should ask. He was asked to ask, and he figures the answer is going to be no, but he's going to go. So he takes a sefer, a holy book, to read, because he figures the line's going to be very long, and he's going to be there all day, and he might have to come back another day. And he goes to the office in Berlin, and he sees a line around the block of people waiting. So he goes into the office where they're taking names, and he gives his name, Rabbi Naphtali Carlebach. And he goes to the end of the line to wait. After about 20 minutes, he hears a voice going up and down the row of people. Rabbi Carlebach, Rabbi Carlebach, Rabbi Carlebach. And he, yes, that's me. And he says, come with me. The general will see you now. And he's taken by surprise. He's only waited 20 minutes. And he goes into this big, German general. And the general says to him, are you by any chance related to Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach? And he said, yes, that was my father. He said, whatever you have come here to ask, it's yours. And now I want to tell you a story about your father. And he tells him the following story. He said that there was a time in Germany in the late 1800s when there was a huge immigration of German Jews to the United States and also some to Israel, and they left behind their elderly families, their elderly parents. Whether the parents didn't want to go or they couldn't go, I don't know the reason why they were all left behind, but probably they were too old and they didn't want to go, and probably they couldn't get everybody out. And so the Jewish community was faced with caring for all these people, and they wanted to build an old age home. So the rabbis of the community got together and they had a talk, and they decided that they were going to have to fundraise, because what's the biggest problem in every Jewish community is raising the money. So they knew that the finance minister to the Kaiser was like the president, was the head of the country. The finance minister was a Jew. He was an older man. He had had nothing to do with Judaism his whole entire life. He never converted, but he was a Jew. So Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach volunteered that he would go to see him. Even though people had tried for years when they needed money for some project, he was an extremely wealthy man. And they were rejected. They didn't even get to the door. So he goes to the house, he knocks on the door. The butler answers the door. And he says, I'm Rabbi so-and-so Carlebach. I'm here to see the finance minister. And he says, 1 minute. And he goes and he comes back and he says, please come in. The finance minister will see you now. And he goes in and he's greeted quite warmly. And the finance minister says to him, for the last 3 nights, I've been having dreams of my grandfather appeared to me in my dream. And he told me that Mimi from Yerushalayim. And he told him that his grandfather had come to him and said, a rabbi is going to come to you. And he didn't believe his dream, but when his butler told him there's a rabbi coming to see him, he said he understood that this was something from another place. So he says to him, so your father, Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, told the finance minister why he was there, that he was collecting money for this old age home. And they developed a friendship, they've developed a relationship, and eventually he gave almost all the money to build this old age home, which stood in Berlin until World War II, when the Nazis probably killed off all the people that were in it and turned it into a stable for horses. And so the general says to him, their relationship continued for a long period of time. And when the finance minister was close to death, he was ill, he asked Rabbi Carlebach if he would officiate at his funeral. And he said that he would officiate if everything was according to Jewish law, and he agreed. And this German general who was telling the story said, do you see me? We German generals are the meanest and the toughest people. He said, I was at that funeral. And for the 15 minutes that your father spoke, I believed in God. And that's the story. And so it's a time when we want to arouse our hearts to God. I hope this teaching tonight was giving some strengthening to an awareness and an elevation of consciousness, how we can go forward. And I'll just conclude my story, that was the concluding story, with another story. There's a video clip that came to me this week, but I remember the story from many years ago when that happened. And basically, during the time of fighting in Israel, in the wars by Gaza, when there was supposed to be a ceasefire, and the ceasefire did not happen, and attacks minutes that the ceasefire was supposed to be started, and it was stopped, and there was hundreds of missiles and rockets that were sent into Israel. There was there, and I'm sure everybody by now has heard of the tunnels, the horrible, horrible tunnels that were built from Gaza into Israel that were there for terrorist attacks and for killing of Jews, which tragically happened. And so what happened was that this was the first tunnel that was discovered. And they had planned and built this tunnel in the middle of a wheat field that was in a moshav, in a farm that was right on the border between Gaza and Israel. And a small time before, there were a group of very religious Jews that had been driving in the area looking for fields of green wheat. Because in order to make shmora matzah, the handmade matzah, and in order to make it on the highest level and the highest standard, the wheat needed to be cut when it was still green, and it needed to be stored for a period of 2 years and kept away from moisture, many conditions to it. And these Hasidim were driving around looking for fields of wheat that they could purchase, because the time when the wheat would stop being green and would start to ripen in a different way would prevent them then from being able to find new wheat to store. And they came across this huge field of wheat, absolutely huge field of wheat. And they went to the farmer and they wanted to buy this field of wheat. And he didn't really want to sell it at first. He said that, you know, he could get more money if he waited a few months and took it to the market in September. And they kept saying to him, listen, you know, look at how much money you're going to have to put into, you know, watering and growing and caring for it. And then you're going to have to sell it piecemeal. We are willing today, right now, to buy your whole entire field. And he finally agreed, and they cut down the whole entire field. And when the terrorists emerged from this first tunnel that they built, thinking that they were going to be protected by this 5 and 6 feet field of wheat that would hide them till they could get to the kibbutzim and the houses to murder people, what happened is they came up, I think there were 13 of them, came up out of the tunnels, and they looked around and they were totally exposed. And there are cameras in the sky and watching. And this is one of the jobs of the women soldiers, is that when I used to sit in Hebron and there were women soldiers in Hebron, and we would go on Shabbos day to speak with them, they could never keep their eyes off the camera, eyes on the camera constantly. And they were being watched, and within like 90 seconds, they were seen and they were taken out and captured. So that's another Passover miracle story. So I wanna say l'chaim and wish everybody a kosher and joyous Passover, and we should all merit, every single one of us, to reach the redemption and to be together in the rebuilt Jerusalem with Mashiach, and that we should really have in our difficult situations, in our limited situations again this year, that we really should be going out of exile, and we should be going out of any limitations and out of restrictions, and we really should merit the complete healing of the world. And when we eat the matzah with consciousness and thought and depth, we should really have the merit that our emunah is strengthened, our faith is strengthened, and that we can really be the best people that we could be. So I want to thank everybody again for inspiring me and for helping me to get out of my cleaning mode. And now I'm going to put on my apron and take off my glamour wig and go back to who I really am. Okay, anyway, so l'chaim, everybody. Thank you. It should really be We should merit to just have the revealed redemption with Mashiach immediately, absolutely immediately. Okay, see you next week. Okay, bye-bye.